This video is brought to you by NVIDIA GeForce RTX 40 series GPUs, delivering industry-leading performance and unmatched visuals in games like Alan Wake 2 and its recent Lake House expansion, Red Dead Redemption on PC, and Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more about how NVIDIA's cutting-edge hardware will transform the way you play. Gamers, can you believe it has been a week since Dragon Age The Veilguard launched? It feels like way longer than that, for no reason in particular. Lots to get to this week, but first, why don't we start with some good news? And nothing cheers you up like the promise of a shiny new Nintendo console. The Switch 2 feels like one of those desert mirages at this point. We can clearly see it in the distance, but the closer we get to it, the further away it is. We were told again and again and again by leakers that we would definitely see a reveal of the device this year, with many leakers suggesting that it would be shown in September, and then October. And now here we are in November with no sign that things are about to change. Still, we do know that it's coming at some point. I mean, the Switch is so old that my air conditioning remote can run games at better resolutions and frame rates. Plus, Nintendo has confirmed that they plan to make an announcement about the console sometime before March next year. To be clear though, the reveal of the Switch 2 is unlikely to be a very big surprise. Based on patents, based on leaks, based on general vibes, we're all but certain that the Switch 2 is very likely going to just be a more powerful Switch, with a similar form factor since you don't fix what ain't broken, except for the Joy-Con drift of course. One big question everyone had though was, will the Switch 2 be backwards compatible? This is something that's become a central question in the modern era as people have begun to amass large digital libraries with the general expectation that they could continue to play those games on future devices. It would be a logical feature to assume, of course, but Nintendo has made no small amount of cash this past generation by re-releasing old games onto the Switch and charging a pretty penny for it while doing it. With so many re-releases and remasters under their belt this past generation, we all wondered if Nintendo would abandon this revenue stream in the next generation. The good news is that yes, they will. Don't take it from me though. Take it from Nintendo boss Shuntaro Furukawa, who tweeted this out while we were all doom-scrolling election updates. Quote, "This is Furukawa. At today's corporate management policy briefing, we announced that Nintendo Switch software will also be playable on the successor to Nintendo Switch. Nintendo Switch Online will be available on the successor to Nintendo Switch as well. Further information about the successor to Nintendo Switch, including its compatibility with Nintendo Switch, will be announced at a later date," end quote. So that's cool, right? We don't have definitive confirmation that digital purchases will be backwards compatible, but I don't think he would have put out a statement like that if that was at all a question. It's great because it means that that huge Switch library you might have amassed this generation will carry over, and we might even begin to imagine the possibility of Switch games running better on newer hardware. I mean, there are a bunch of Nintendo Switch titles hovering at around that like 20 to 25 FPS mark based purely on console throughput, so presumably more powerful hardware will at least lock in solid 30 FPS frame rates in games like Tears of the Kingdom and Echoes of Wisdom. Hell, if the Switch 2 ends up getting AI upscaling as is rumored, we might even see 4K resolution for older titles if developers choose to provide a backwards compatible update. Speaking of Nintendo, they provided a financial update and it definitely reflects the fact that the Switch is on its last legs. Nintendo cut both projected unit sales and overall profit projections, reflecting a roughly 30% decline in both hardware and software sales year on year. Interestingly, digital sales now account for 56.3% of Nintendo's overall game sales, and Echoes of Wisdom sold through 2.58 million units, a fairly solid result for what is a very niche Zelda spin-off title. Sticking with the financials a little longer, Microsoft also issued an earnings update, and there were quite a few interesting tidbits in there about how Xbox is tracking. So top line, it's a good news story. Xbox revenue is up 61%, with 53% of that being from the Activision Blizzard King acquisition, meaning that Xbox did achieve some notable organic growth too. Much of that is likely owed to Game Pass doing pretty well, as Microsoft reported that even after a price hike and shuffling around benefit tiers, Game Pass revenue and user counts hit all new records. Interestingly, Microsoft boss Satya Nadella revealed that the launch of Call of Duty Black Ops 6 was the most successful launch in the history of the franchise, resulting in not only a record for day one players, but also a 60% increase in PlayStation and Steam sales year on year, no doubt buttressing the argument for more Xbox games to go multi-platform. That multi-platform goal is clearly something Nadella is committed to. Speaking on the Sterling COD result, he said this, quote, "This speaks to our strategy of meeting gamers where they are and enabling them to play more games across the screens they spend their time on," end quote. Nadella is all in on this stuff because Xbox needs to grow, and they certainly can't rely on their Xbox console sales to deliver that, since they flatlined a long time ago and show no signs of rallying anytime soon. This matters more than ever to the Microsoft boss because, as spotted by Stephen Totillo's GameFile newsletter last week, Nadella's reward package will now be more weighted towards delivering strong Xbox growth. Last year, 10% of his total reward package was dependent on Xbox performance, and this year it'll be 15%. It's only a small difference, but it does suggest that Microsoft are expecting Xbox to grow in this post-Activision Blizzard King acquisition era, and if Nadella hits his mark across all business targets, he'll get to walk away with at least $80 million in compensation. please remember that number the next time he or Phil Spencer tells you that job cuts are a painful but necessary measure. Turning now to Dragon Age The Veilguard news, the game has been out for just over a week, and with the discourse around it finally starting to die down, we can start to have some actual conversations about how this thing actually landed. So obviously we all recall that Dragon Age The Veilguard did very well with critics. Right now on OpenCritic it's sitting at a mighty 81. That's a great result for BioWare, but as I've said on a few occasions, I don't think that a number of those reviews accurately reflect some of the game's core issues, namely the writing, the lack of choice, the PG-13 tone, and some issues with combat depending on how much you're up for what Veilguard is putting down. Sure enough, the Steam reviews are quite different. Over there it's sitting at a mostly positive 73% with nearly 15,000 reviews counted, and to be perfectly honest, that's kind of where I expected it to land. You might think, well, aren't a lot of those just troll reviews? And sure, some of them are, but if you take the time to read through them, you'll see that most have very substantive things to say about why they do or do not like Veilguard. I'd also encourage you to spend a bit of time on the various Dragon Age and BioWare subreddits, where it's clear that people are very divided about this game. Plenty of threads are saying that they enjoy Veilguard for what it is, but plenty of others feel like Veilguard is a big disappointment and a real step back for the franchise in many aspects. There's been much debate about how successful Veilguard has been commercially, with some people desperate to prove that Veilguard is a smashing success, and others desperate to prove that it's like a Concord level flop. The truth is rather boring, and here it is. Veilguard has done fine. It peaked at a concurrent player count of nearly 90,000 people on Steam, which is a great result, but far from the sort of breakout success that EA might have been hoping for. I mean, compare it to Dragon's Dogma 2, which launched earlier this year. That was a far more niche IP and a PC port that was way less optimized, but that still managed to hit over 228,000 concurrent players. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 also managed to crack the 220k concurrent mark. Point is, 85k is good, but it isn't coming anywhere near the level of success that some of the year's biggest games have achieved, but it's also not so bad that CEO Andy Wilson might have to sell one of his yachts to make up the revenue shortfall. Here's what I think though, and it's similar to what I said at the end of my review. Net, cutting out all the bullshit, I don't think Dragon Age The Veilguard can be classed as a success for BioWare. This is a top-tier, legacy, AAA studio, stewarding some seriously beloved franchises and operating at a very high burn rate for EA. I don't think that Veilguard has achieved the sort of commercial success or user critic reception that puts everyone's mind at ease about the future of this studio and the games they're working on. I don't like saying that out loud because, as I've said on many occasions, I want BioWare to survive and thrive, but I think it's just a very matter-of-fact look at the situation, and honestly, I don't know where things go from here. Only EA knows if Dragon Age The Veilguard hit the metrics it needed to hit, and all I can say is that I really hope that it did. A quick lightning round to finish off. Star Wars Outlaws has a new creative director. If you're thinking, wait a second, isn't that game already out? Then yes, you are correct. While it's very common for live service games to get a new creative director post-launch, it's highly unusual for it to happen in the case of offline single-player games. Nevertheless, Ubisoft has announced that Drew Reckner has assumed the creative director mantle, while the previous creative director, Julian Garrity, moves over to lead work on The Division 3. Reckner says that Ubi Massive are hard at work on making improvements to Outlaws, which launched to fairly middling reviews but disappointing sales, prompting Ubisoft to not only delay their next big release, Assassin's Creed Shadows, but also announce a company-wide transformation program aiming to restore a focus on quality and innovation. Reckner says that they're focused on improving core game systems, including combat, stealth, and controls, and that's the sort of stuff that probably should have been in tip-top shape before the game launched. Either way, it's good to know that Ubi haven't given up on this one yet, because I think there's a solid experience buried under all that messy gameplay and those terrible facial animations. Atari has just acquired the rights to Transport Tycoon. These were originally the property of Chris Sawyer, who created not only this series, but also Roller Coaster Tycoon. Atari has bought up all of the Roller Coaster Tycoon IP over the years and is now adding the Transport IP to their portfolio. Unclear what they plan to do with it, since the original came out back in 1994 and never got an official sequel, though plenty of other games have tried to deliver the same hit. To this day though, Transport Tycoon remains very respected as a game ahead of its time, so I'm sure plenty of people would turn up if Atari were to get the right team of people behind it. If you were one of the few people playing Apex Legends on your Steam Deck, well, you're not anymore. This week, Respawn blocked access to the game via Linux platforms, including the deck, citing security vulnerabilities. Apparently, it was just too easy for hackers to do their thing on Linux, so Respawn decided to just shut off that valve, pun intended. It's not uncommon to see this, by the way. Quite a few multiplayer games don't run on Linux as it isn't compatible with a number of anti-cheat technologies. You can, of course, just install Windows on your deck and it'll work fine, but if you want to run it from the native Steam OS, then yeah, you're fresh out of luck. Adaptations check-in time. There's a new House of the Dead movie coming, this one from Paul W.S. Anderson, the guy behind Resident Evil and that recent Monster Hunter movie, yeesh. It's being handled by the same production house that's responsible for the Sonic movies, but they seem to be loading up every Sega franchise they can get their hands on, so it's hard to see how all of these movies end up getting released. This one's planning to be in full production by the end of next year though. Will it be better than the 2003 version of House of the Dead directed by Yui Boll, which sits at a 2 out of 10 on IMDb? Maybe, but let's hope not. We all love a good room-level disaster. The other adaptation announcement is for horror game Outlast, which is getting a film courtesy of Roy Lee, who horror game adaptations make a lot of sense since this is basically the only genre of movie still making money. No dates or specifics for this one just yet. Some quick sales data to top you up. Kingdom Come Deliverance has just surpassed 8 million units sold, a fantastic result for the very ambitious, very worthwhile, historically inspired RPG. A well-timed result, given that the sequel is due out in February next year. I played the sequel briefly at Gamescom, and I loved it just as much as I loved the first one, which is to say a lot. Wishing all the best to Warhorse as they enter the home stretch of development. The Monster Hunter Wild beta happened across all platforms bar Switch over the weekend. We don't have player counts for Xbox or PlayStation, but on PC, the beta peaked at 463,000 concurrent players. Sure, it was a free-to-play open beta, but let's not pretend that that isn't an absolutely incredible result that bodes very well for the game's launch prospects. Hell, it's looking so huge that Sega brought that Pirate Yakuza game forward by a week just so it wouldn't be anywhere near Monster Hunter's orbit. Pretty smart if you ask me. Here's something I've been waiting to say for a long ass time. Remedy are reporting that the studio has now recouped most of its development and marketing expenses for Alan Wake 2, meaning that one of the best survival horror games ever made has now broken even. As an Epic exclusive, the game had always been severely hamstrung in terms of sales, but on the flip side, Epic have been extraordinary partners to Remedy, and there's every chance that we never would have gotten Alan Wake 2 were it not for Tim Sweeney ponying up the dough. By the way, don't forget the final Alan Wake 2 DLC is out now. It's called The Lake House. I haven't tried it yet, but apparently it's a banger. Call of Duty has now surpassed 500 million units sold across the lifetime of the franchise. To put that in perspective, that's like 2.5 GTA 5s. See? Doesn't sound so impressive now, does it? No, 500 million is still pretty good. And good news for all the Zuck haters out there, Meta's push to create the metaverse is still losing money faster than the mint can print it. $4.4 billion lost in the last quarter alone, and in their earnings report, Meta has warned that future losses are to be even greater as they continue to scale their technology platforms. Even greater than $4.4 billion in one quarter. Zuck is like the Joker in the Dark Knight with that big burning pile of cash, except all of his investors seem totally cool with it, so I really have no idea how Wall Street actually works. So what got announced or delayed last week? Still relatively quiet on this front, but the biggest new announcement is probably Ghost Town, which is a new game by Fireproof Games, the indie team who put together the excellent first-person puzzling series The Room. That game eventually went to VR, and it looks like this team wanted to stay there because Ghost Town is a VR adventure game inspired by 1980s mystery novels. You play as a ghost hunter and exorcist tackling London's restless spirits, while also trying to solve the mystery of your missing brother. Looks neat, no date yet, but it'll be out on all VR platforms. Meanwhile, THQ Nordic teased a new SpongeBob SquarePants game coming in 2025 in a very brief Halloween trailer. Lots of people seem happy with that announcement and how THQ have been handling the SpongeBob video game, so good for them. The Playdate, remember that one? It's that quirky handheld with a crank? Well, it got a new showcase last week where the headline item was that there will be a Playdate Season 2 in 2025. What the hell does that mean? Well, basically, when the Playdate first launched, the console slowly dripped 24 games to owners over 12 weeks, and all those games were surprises, eventually revealing themselves to be little indies made by the creators of games like Katamari Damacy, Getting Over It, Mark of the Ninja, Curse to Golf, and plenty more. The intention was to have lots of people gather around these new games all at once, but the pandemic and all those chip shortages happened, so that didn't quite work out on a scale they'd planned, but now they've got their pipeline fixed, and so it's happening again. No clue as to what's going to be contained in Season 2, but hopefully it'll be good. Moving on to some updates on previously announced games. Beastie Ball is a new game being published by Clay, the folks behind Don't Starve and other games, which is essentially like what if Pokemon, but you were putting together a volleyball team. Seems like a pretty cool concept, and they just announced an early access release date for this one, November 12th. Next up is the epily-inducing, surprisingly competent shooter titled, and this is real, 420 Blaze It 2, Game of the Year, Dank Dreams, and Goated Memes, WoW out of 11, like and subscribed, Poggers Edition. And we featured this one and put this on your radar a little while back, so you've probably heard that title before. That one just got a release date announcement November 14th, and that's all the time we have for that one, since it takes so long to say the title out loud. Just one game cancellation this week, but it's not at all surprising. Elder Scrolls Legends. This one was trying to get a slice of the Hearthstone pie, but last week it was pulled off Steam completely, and there's now an in-game message saying that the servers will be shut down next year on January 30th. Why is this unsurprising? Well, development for this one stopped as far back as 2019, owing to poor uptake and revenue, and of course, rather than trying to preserve it with some sort of offline mode, Bethesda would rather just delete it entirely. a sad but predictable end for most live service titles, and a trend that we're unlikely to see change anytime soon. So what came out last week? Well, first up, Pokemon trading card game Pocket was launched on Wednesday and absolutely demolished all social media feeds. This is basically like the Pokemon company's answer to Marvel Snap, though card collecting takes an equal amount of precedence to the actual battling. It's free to play, but market intelligence firm Sensor Tower told Stephen Totillo of GameFile that according to its data, the game attracted around $2 million in revenue on its first day of launch from 1.2 million downloads and $2.8 million on its second day. AppMagic's estimates are a bit more lofty though, estimating that it's made $12 million in its first 4 days. The only thing that Pokemon Company has confirmed is that 10 million people have downloaded it worldwide, which is obviously a fair amount of people. Of course, these games live and die by how long people stick with them, so it'll be interesting to track the year ahead. Then again, Pokemon Sleep earned $120 million in its first 14 months. And you don't do jack shit in that game, you literally just sleep. So a card battler probably has a pretty good shot at making some cash. The remastered version of Horizon Zero Dawn also came out on Halloween, and the sentiment we assumed is basically the go here. On OpenCritic, it attracted a mighty aggregate score of 85 from outlets and critics. The 6 Axes gave it an 8 out of 10, summarizing it this way, quote, "It might not have been a wholly necessary overhaul, but there's plenty to like about it, from greater visual depths and details to the majorly improved dialogues," end quote. Well Played also gave it an 8 out of 10 and explained that, quote, "This isn't a mere transposing and uplifting of existing assets with a new performance profile. Instead, Nixxes has basically re-arted the game from top to bottom with new technologies, new environmental detail, textures, animations, camera direction, lighting effects, character models, everything. The result is a game that truly offers a generational leap in visual fidelity and also works from an updated style guide to bring it closer to its sequel in overall art direction. That, to me, is the more noteworthy result of this endeavor," end quote. Over on Steam, however, the sentiment has landed on mixed 1 week in, with players upset about the mandatory PSN login requirement, fair enough, but also remarking on some technical issues too. Some of them visual, but most of them largely pointed to controller issues, which seems to be a bit of a problem. Surprising given how strong Nixxes ports have been to date. Maybe hold out for a patch or two if you were planning on picking this one up. Square Enix's Triangle strategy was rebuilt for VR and released on MetaQuest last week. Not many reviews from the usual outlets, which is typical for VR games. We know it's a great game in its own right. It's currently at a strong 83 on OpenCritic, and the user reviews on the MetaQuest store seem to be pretty happy with how it's been adapted to VR. Here's one from Kneehawks55 who said, quote, "Great game that works better than expected in VR for half the console price. The only complaint is that cutscenes are 2D over a scroll that functions as a big screen TV," end quote. Another Japanese game that got a second lease on life this week is Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered, the schlocky action game from Shinji Mikami and Suda51. That one landed at a fair 73 on OpenCritic, with critics quite mixed about the game's 13-year-old gameplay and especially its humor. PC Gamer gave it a 74, saying, quote, "At its best, it reminds me of my youth, where every new game had the potential to be something just as marvelous and ridiculous, self-indulgently fun and self-indulgently stupid. At its worst, it also reminds me of my youth, but more the part where I and everyone else I knew was confused and horny and dealing with that in ways that were not societally recommended," end quote. Special shout out to the PC Games N review, however, which is the only review that Suda51 shared on social media, saying, quote, "They just gave us an awesome review, be sure to check it out, exclamation mark," end quote. Said review gave the game a 3 out of 10, saying, quote, "Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered is a crude, mean-spirited, and dangerously unfunny trip down memory lane with a grating cast, middling gunplay, and only the most minor of visual enhancements," end quote. So take Suda's endorsement of that review as you will. And finally, Redacted is the new Hades-like isometric action roguelike set in the world of the Callisto Protocol, a smaller project for that team, and it's landing at a strong 75 on OpenCritic, though not too many reviews out at the time of writing. GameSpot scored it a 6 out of 10 with positive sentiment at the end, saying, quote, "There's a good game in here, somewhere in the middle, once you're past the lackluster opening and monotonous ending. Redacted doesn't really expand on the Callisto Protocol universe, but I'm glad it exists. For as flawed as both games are, I still haven't lost interest in seeing more stories from this world, and I hope Striking Distance has a chance to tell them. Redacted just falls short a few too many times," end quote. But wait, there was yet another series that made the genre jump this week. That's Metal Slug Tactics, which transposes SNK's run-and-gun shooter onto the turn-based tactics game format. It's come in at a strong 79 on OpenCritic, with critics praising the always beautiful sprite work of the series and the fact that they've managed to keep the game's fairly brisk pace intact. IGN gave this an 8 out of 10, saying, quote, "Metal Slug Tactics lives up to its stone-cold classics namesake from SNK's golden era with its painstakingly detailed pixel art, head-bopping soundtrack, and snappy structure. It magnificently translates the run-and-gun series into its first turn-based tactics game, but doesn't sacrifice substance for cheap nostalgia either, end quote. That one's also on Game Pass this week if that tickles your fancy. So what's coming out this week? Well, after the big guns last week, it seems like this week is for smaller titles and indie games, and that's a nice thing sometimes. It's all about pacing. But hey, we've also got a Mario game coming, so that's cool. Kicking things off is Planet Coaster 2, which comes out on Wednesday. Planet Coaster was a very competent theme park management game, and it took a while for the dev team to get around to a sequel because they were too busy making Jurassic World management games. The big hook for this sequel is water park attractions, which seem to have gone over pretty well with critics, but they're a little more divided on the management sim aspects. Reviews for this one are already out, and it's landed at a strong 81 on OpenCritic. PC Gamer scored an 80, saying, quote, "There are richer management sims out there than Planet Coaster 2, and if you want a game about spinning plates and sticking more than a few of them back together, I'd sooner recommend either the 2 Points games or the Ultimate Organizational Challenge, Factorio, and its Space Age expansion. That said, nowhere is the act of building a theme park better represented than in Frontier's series, and the sequel's added water attractions unquestionably elevated above the original, end quote." Also coming out on November 6th is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate, which is the co-op Turtles Hades-like that was previously an Apple Arcade exclusive for a full year. That one's headed to PC ahead of a console release a little later this year. It's joined on Wednesday by Lost Eidolon's Veil of the Witch, which launches on Steam in early access. This is a second attempt from the studio Ocean Drive to recreate the tactical RPG flavor of the Fire Emblem series and marry it with a roguelike structure. Worth keeping an eye on that one since the first one got a decent reception. On Thursday, Nintendo was releasing its third Mario RPG in the space of 12 months, though this one is actually a brand new one. Mario & Luigi Brothership continues the comedic series where you control Mario and Luigi simultaneously in turn-based battles and other world-exploring elements. This one sees the brothers take control of a giant ship/island hybrid and sail it around the oceans of Concordia, trying to unite scattered islands. Let's hope this journey with Concord goes a little bit better than the last one. Not for nothing, but Ed's been playing this one and he says it's very charming and engaging, keeping in line with what's come before it. Expect to hear more about that one once the embargo drops. Joining the Mario Brothers on Thursday is Metro Awakening, a new entry in the excellent Metro series. The atmosphere and physical in-world UI was always one of the best parts of those games, so it makes a lot of sense that they'd make one for VR, and that's exactly what this is. It is a dedicated VR game, and it's headed to all VR platforms, and I actually do plan to check this one out right after I'm done with Batman Arkham Shadow. Also on Thursday is Taiko no Tatsujin Rhythm Festival for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series. This is Namco's very popular drumming rhythm game, and this version originally came out on Switch in 2022, but weirdly, nowhere else. These new versions have 120 FPS support, however, which is a big deal for reading those really insane note charts when they're going really fast. And speaking of insane, Goat Simulator Remastered rounds out Thursday with a remake possibly more unnecessary than Horizon Zero Dawn. This one promises updated graphics, every DLC, and, quote, more bugs than you can shake a goat at, end quote. This one's out for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series as well. On Friday, Slitherhead hits all platforms bar Switch, arriving 1 week too late for Halloween. This is the new action horror game from Kiichiro Toyama, who is known as the creator of Silent Hill and also the severely underrated Gravity Rush games. He's gone indie now, with Slitherhead being a game where you possess people and use their abilities to hunt down grotesque monsters, who have also possessed people and are hiding in society. Kind of like Watch Dogs Legions, but a lot more horrific. Moving on to next Tuesday, November 12th, which features 2 games that Ed is extremely excited about. The first being Rise of the Golden Idol, which is releasing on all platforms, including mobile through Netflix. This is the sequel to The Curse of the Golden Idol, a detective deduction game where you need to prove you know exactly what is going on in a variety of murder scenes, which also won the award for Best Design at the Independent Games Festival at GDC last year. Also on Tuesday is Tetris Forever, the third in Digital Eclipse's Goldmaster series of interactive documentaries about important video games. This one collects interviews, archival materials, and tries to tell the surprisingly complex and drama-filled story of Tetris, while also providing access to a number of rare and hard-to-get versions of the game for you to play. Also included is Tetris Time Warp, which is a brand new 4-player version of the game developed for the collection, which throws you into different iterations of Tetris throughout history. And rounding out this week's releases is the game you've all been waiting for, Farming Simulator 25, which comes out on Tuesday for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. It is crazy how popular the series is, to be honest, and the People Make Games documentary on the esports scene is well worth watching. Farming Simulator's big new things are a new engine, which is set to hopefully improve the game's all-important weather effects, as well as Asian maps for the first time in the series, which also comes with buffalo farming, as well as the ability to grow rice and spinach. Hell yeah! Looking forward to seeing this one top the sales charts in November. I'm not even joking, by the way. It will actually do that. Bet. Alright, so it's a little weird that Farming Simulator is so popular, but it's not quite as weird as this next one, so put this on your radar. This is Death of the Reprobate, and it's like if you took the vibe of Obsidian's Pentiment, but instead of telling a historically accurate narrative, you just wanted to play silly buggers. That is basically what this is, an adventure game pieced together from Renaissance paintings with a crude and surreal sense of humor right out of Monty Python's Flying Circus. We've actually played this one already, and it'll definitely get you laughing within the first minute. It doesn't stop after that. Please, if you don't believe me, go and check out the trailer. The trailer does exactly the same thing. There's like a joke to reward you for each and every click in this game, so if that's the kind of thing you need right now, then definitely put it on your radar for when it releases on Friday, November 8th. If you'd like to throw it on your wish list, you can do so over on our Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this on your radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and right now Epic is still giving away the flawed but interesting Ghostwire Tokyo as a freebie. Also available is Witch It, a prop hunt game that'll fill the void while we all wait for the next release from Fantastic. Looking forward to that one, boys. Later this week, Epic are giving us Deceive Incorporated, which is a different kind of hunting game. This one's a competitive multiplayer game where basically everyone is the spy from Team Fortress, and you have to disguise yourself and act like a convincing NPC while trying to identify and take down competing spies with guns and gadgets. Obviously, a game that needs a lot of players to thrive, so fingers crossed this giveaway will help on that front. This game also just released a big update at the start of the month too, so keep that in mind. The first wave of Xbox Game Pass games for November was also announced. It's pretty light on since they were pretty busy with the whole Call of Duty thing, but new additions for the first couple of weeks in November include Metal Slug Tactics and Goat Simulator Remastered, both of which we mentioned earlier, as well as Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, which sounds insane from the previews it's had. Always wish I knew how to play those games. They look really fun. Something different this month is that Xbox are announcing which Game Pass games are being added to the lower standard tier of the service that doesn't get day one releases. This month they're adding 4 indies. Those are Go Mecha Ball, Harold Halibut, The Rewinder, and Turnip Boy Robs a Bank. The PS Plus Essentials lineup snuck in just after we finalized the show last week, but this month they're also giving away Ghostwire Tokyo, as well as the absolutely excellent arcade racing game Hot Wheels Unleashed 2. One brand new game release in the mix as well. It's called Death Note Killer Within. This is yet another multiplayer social deduction game, only this one is based on the super popular anime of the same name. Prime Gaming also kicked off November with its absolutely ridiculous lineup of freebies yet again. Right now you can get the superb Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, as well as Mafia Definitive Edition, also great. Dishonored Definitive Edition will also be made available by the time you hear this. That one is an all-timer, and those last 2 games are both good old games codes, so you'll actually own them for good. Later on this month, they'll also be offering Tomb Raider Anniversary, Overcooked, Super Meat Boy, Jurassic World Evolution, and Elite Dangerous, but we'll remind you about those as they come up. Ending off this segment with another cool freebie. On Halloween last week, Lucas Pope released a new game called Moida Mansion, like, you know, how like a wise guy says murder. Lucas Pope is of course the solo dev behind envelope-pushing games like Papers, Please and Return of the Obra Dinn. This one was surprising because Pope usually takes his sweet time on stuff, and Moida Mansion felt like it came out of nowhere. It's a really fun adventure game where you have to sneak into a mansion, scavenge for items, and rescue your friends while avoiding scary monsters, only it takes the form of a super old-school LCD Game & Watch style handheld, really outside-the-box thinking, which is what we've come to expect from Pope, and this is a fun one to try out for free over on his itch.io page. Our feel-good story for the week is a pretty crazy one, and honestly, I'm low-key stunned that someone managed to figure this out. So, Silent Hill 2 arrived earlier this month. Great game, my review below the like button if you want to get the full picture on it. Bloober Team were very careful about what they added to the game, with most of it landing really well, but one thing left people very confused. During your playthrough, you'd find various Polaroid photographs laying around, each of them showing something and accompanied by a few words that may or may not relate to what's being shown in the picture. Now, these were not in the original game, and they did not make sense on their own, so the Silent Hill community immediately engaged detective mode, like Batman at a crime scene. Despite myriad theories, no one could come up with a definitive answer as to what these photographs were, until a Reddit user by the name of Dale Robertson busted this thing wide open. So he looked at each photograph and he counted the number of objects in that photo, like 6 windows or 2 vases, etc. He then looked at the caption for each photo and counted the letter that corresponded to the number of items in the photo. So if a photo had 6 windows, for example, he would then count the 6th letter in the caption. He did that for all 26 photos in the game, and when you string all of those letters together, you get a sentence that reads, "You've been here for 2 decades." Now, what's crazy about this is that it's a sentence that works on multiple levels, because it has been 2 decades since Silent Hill 2 first released, so this statement can be taken literally. But in addition to that, there's also been a long-running fan theory that James is actually trapped in a time loop in Silent Hill, a theory that Bloober Team leaned into in various subtle ways when making the remake. Just in case there was any doubt at all, Bloober Team's creative director confirmed it all in a tweet saying, quote, "I knew it wouldn't stay hidden for long. There was a theory in our company that the puzzle might be too hard. I really wanted to make it subtle when I was painting those photos. I think the timing couldn't be better for you to solve it. Congratulations," end quote. Congratulations indeed, Dale Robertson. Let's hope we won't be waiting another 20 years for the next Silent Hill entry. Alright, ladies and gents, that's the show for the week. I'm actually working on a PS5 Pro review at the moment since I got the console last week and I've been putting it through its paces. I have mixed feelings on it, to be honest, but I'll talk about that in the review, which will go up over the weekend. So if you want to make sure you don't miss that one, then be sure to subscribe and ding that notification bell. Also, did you have fun today? If you did, we'd love it if you could give the video a like. That always makes our day. Thanks again for stopping by, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, In Video. We're at the back end of the year now, which means all the biggest games are either out or dropping real soon, and if you want your games looking and running their absolute best, you're going to want to play them on a GPU from this video's sponsor, NVIDIA. We all know who NVIDIA are, the undisputed leaders in graphical technology, and they've held that position for as long as they have because they've been utterly relentless in the innovation they've delivered in both their hardware and in the tech that pushes that hardware even further. It all starts with the GeForce RTX 40 series GPU, the latest and greatest hardware that delivers industry-leading performance. If it's raw processing power you're after, then the 40 series GPU is unmatched. But it doesn't stop there, because NVIDIA GPUs are more than just their throughput. They're also about the proprietary NVIDIA technology that can push that hardware to new heights. NVIDIA DLSS 3 is one example. DLSS 3 frame generation uses AI to interlace additional frames in between those which are being natively rendered by your hardware. This can often double and sometimes triple your frame rates in games, and that's something that I personally have experienced in a huge number of games that I've tested. It's a feature supported across a huge range of titles too. Take Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, which just launched this past week. That is a game that supports DLSS 3 with frame generation, so you're getting the smoothest possible experience, and it also supports NVIDIA Reflex for more snappy and responsive gameplay. Same goes for Red Dead Redemption, which also launched last week on PC. Yeah, it's a 14-year-old game, but the technology that powers it on PC is anything but old, as it also supports both DLSS 3 and NVIDIA Reflex, giving you the headroom to enable 4K resolution and ultra-wide gameplay depending on your setup. And don't forget that Alan Wake 2 Lake House DLC, which also recently launched. Alan Wake 2 has long been one of the best showcases for NVIDIA tech, not only because of its support for DLSS, but also ray tracing. And honestly, there are very few games on the market that look better than Alan Wake 2, and so much of that is owed to the incredible lighting that NVIDIA RTX ray tracing delivers. As of last month, over 600 games are now enhanced by NVIDIA's RTX technology, and more titles are added every month. PC gaming is at its absolute best with AI-powered NVIDIA DLSS. So if you'd like to learn more about these games and this technology, then I've left a link to NVIDIA's DLSS page below. Thanks NVIDIA for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.